Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm your host for the podcast, Different Thinking for Different Times. And my name is Steve Lentini. And joining me today is Toni Wills. Now, full disclosure, her name is Toni Lentini Wills. And that's not why I reached out to her. I reached out to her because of her fascinating background and all the things she's doing to help other women in the business world and as entrepreneurs, coaching them and modeling a behavior for others to see, which is fascinating, right? That has so much power. And so that's what she provides to women. And I'm going to let her tell you about the story. And before I do that, I'm just going to say different thinking for different times is about us stretching what I call the acorn brain, that little incessant voice in our heads that has us doing things we sometimes regret. It has us reacting instead of responding. And whether it's as a parent or a leader or a politician or even a religious person, sometimes today we have such small-minded thinking and we live in something limitless. We live in a miracle. And you know that if you've listened to my podcast, folks, I know over the 5 years, many have. I had a near-death experience, so I had a peek at what's next. And if we all did, I mean, not before this podcast ends, but if we all did, we wouldn't be so petty. It's amazing. And it's way beyond what the human mind has written about. It's way beyond the ideas of a vengeful, angry person or individual running the universe. That's where we show up as human and small-minded. Anything small-minded it does not reflect what created this miracle we live in. And that's enough of that. So the rest of the episode is going to be about Toni. So let's go into her fascinating background. I want you all to meet Toni Wills.
Well, hi, Steve. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Toni. I'm excited to have you, especially when I looked at your background and all the things that you were doing. That prompted me to invite you. So Thank you for being a guest.
Oh, absolutely. Anyone with the same last name, it's an automatic yes.
We're not related.
No, off air, we were chatting, and there's no relation that we know of, but I spell my surname, which is now my middle name, the same exact way.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. And there's a town, right, in Sicily called Lentini. Yeah.
There is. My dad is very proud of that. He actually went there several years ago.
Oh.
And I was just in Italy 2 weeks ago, but I was more north. So my goal is to go back and get to Sicily.
Oh, that's great. All right. So start where you want to tell us. I mean, I'm fascinated by how you're modeling for women in business and women in entrepreneurship and women in general. And your career models that. So tell us about all that.
Yeah, so I have a very unconventional career. It started more in a conventional path, but I'll kind of start in the middle and then I'll work backwards. But currently right now, I am the GM, general manager of a men's professional hockey team called the Kalamazoo Wings. And so we're double A professional hockey. So there's the NHL, then there's the American Hockey League, and then there's the ECHL, and that's the league the Kalamazoo Wings are in. We're a 50-year-old franchise, and we develop players and front office staff to move up the hockey ranks. And I have been the GM of this franchise for going on 10 years now. And as you can imagine, I am very much a minority in what I do for a living. There are less than a handful of women in the country that do what I do for a living. And many years ago, I was sitting around the boardroom. And so just so everyone understands how leagues are governed, they're governed by a board of governors. So it's kind of like a board of directors where the commissioner reports up to the board of governors. I'm the governor for Kalamazoo. And so I'm sitting in these meetings and there's 29 teams in our league. And I'm looking around the room and I was like, whoa, I am like, there's no women here. There's like two. And no one's really talking about it. I didn't feel uncomfortable, but I thought, I got some work to do here. And so began my mission around diversity, equity, inclusion, and starting to talk about, okay, who are the women in sports? these are talented individuals. Where do they want to go? What do they want to do? And so this has been kind of I've been there 10 years. So the last 8 years, I've really been working on championing this, and which launched into my own podcast, which I just started a little over a month ago. And congratulations to you for a podcast for 5 years. That's a huge deal. So I'm a month in and I'm like, 5 years? Holy cow. That's a lot of episodes, Steve. That's impressive. So I launched a podcast and I lift other women up, empower women. But I have men and women on my podcast and it's called Women in ... And the ... is fill in the blank, right? Women in sports, women in entrepreneurship, women in motherhood, women in midlife. It could be anything. And I have men on there too, because where did men come from? Women.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about it. It's kind of taken off, and we have really transparent, disruptive conversations around the women in their lives that have lifted them up and the women they're lifting up and empowering.
Yeah, I love that whole idea. And you mentioned men come from women. Yeah, I don't know if sometimes they forget that. But also, men have the gene that determine the sex of children, so we rely on each other, right? Men create, women come from men, and men come from women. That's a symbiotic relationship, one that deserves respect and the highest regard for each other. And I think that should be in all of life. But in particular, what have you discovered since you started the podcast? What are some of your ahas, and what are some things you'd like to leave people with, right? What your ideas about this whole thing?
So some of the ahas have really it's been neat for my podcast guests to kind of dive into an area they haven't given much thought to. So when I say, well, there's one question I always open with: how did we meet, my podcast guest and I? Because there's something very telling in that. In terms, did we meet in an elevator? Did we meet virtually? Have we ever met? Because some of my podcast guests I've never met because I've been connected to them through someone else I know. So how did we come into each other's lives? And then it's just been interesting to hear when I ask the question, who are the women that have lifted you up? The stories I get, and they've like, I haven't thought about this in a long time or ever. So you hear about grandmas, you hear about their moms, you hear about female mentors, you hear about siblings, clergy people. You just hear about a lot of, they haven't given it thought, and then they pick up the phone to say, I want to call this person. Because one, I mentioned them on a podcast, and two, I owe them a phone call.
Where did we meet? So we met on LinkedIn, right?
We did. You and I met on LinkedIn. And I think you connected with me because of our last name, right?
Yeah. I was researching Lentinis and thought, wow, I wonder how many are on LinkedIn. There's quite a few.
Yeah. And you reached out and I said, well, heck yeah, I'm going to connect with him. Because I don't say yes to everyone that tries to connect with me, especially if they're trying to sell me something. And so, but I was like, oh, Steve's got the same last name. He's in.
Yeah. Selling people something. I wrote the book Helping People Buy. And the last thing I would tell them to do is what I'm sure you see on LinkedIn is people are reaching out saying, hey, how about this? We do this and we do that. And would you schedule a 15-minute call? And I think I'm fascinated by it. They haven't even figured out how to get to know me a little bit. And what do I do? And how could they help me? So that's usually a no when people reach out like that.
Oh, same. And I teach courses. I just came back from the summer league meetings for the league that we're in. And I facilitated a workout session called Sales Isn't a Dirty Word, and talked about the right way to sell.
Yeah.
And because we've got salespeople at entry level, at expert level, and so I facilitated a session on that and how to be a great sales leader. And part of it is getting to know your prospects and not just spamming them with messages.
Yeah. Is it a fit? What are they looking for? And then who do they know, right? Because a customer is the best source of the next customer. Yeah.
100% referrals. That's how I built. I'm an entrepreneur as well. That's how I built my business. I chose to stop drinking. I removed alcohol from my life nearly 4 years ago. So I help other individuals do the same. Well, who do drinkers normally hang out with? Other drinkers.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, Friday night, right? At the watering hole, right?
that's
People,
right.
right? There's where those expressions came from. So, okay. So there is so much when I think about what you've done. So the Kalamazoo Wings, that must be fascinating watching over 10 years, watching people around you develop and young men develop and move up into the NHL,
Mm-hmm.
right? So talk about that.
Yeah, it's fun from both sides, the business operation side and then the hockey operation side, because our franchise is turning 50 years old this year, which is
I'm amazed.
huge.
Yeah, it's huge.
Especially in a community the size of Kalamazoo. We're a small market team. Normally, professional sports do not exist in a community the size of Kalamazoo. We're 75,000 proper. Usually, pro sports teams are in huge communities, right, with millions of people or hundreds of thousands at the very least. And so we've had, in recent years, 2 Stanley Cup winners that have played on our team. But in total, there's been 25 Stanley Cup winners over the 50 years.
Wow.
And over 200 that have gone on to the NHL.
Wow.
And played at that national level. We're very proud of that. And that's what our league is about. It's about developing that talent, that kind of raw talent, and honing it in and then having them move up to the American League. And so we're affiliated with Vancouver, the Vancouver Canucks, and then National Hockey League, and then the Abbotsford Canucks in Abbotsford, Canada. And so that's who we are affiliated with. And that's how our players move up and down. And it is so rewarding to see them make that leap. And sometimes they go up and come back down. Right. And that's okay too. It's not, it's a two-way street. And then in the front office side,
helps them.
Yeah, it does. It
helps them with that transition, because there's a euphoria going up the chain and not so much coming down the chain. There's a reality check, right?
Yeah, and you got to work that much harder if you want to keep your spot at the higher league, right? Yeah. The front office on the business side, and that's what I'm responsible for, all business operations. So sales, marketing, community relations, public relations, broadcasting, creative production, all reports to me.
Wow.
And so those individuals, I've had probably at least 30 come through in my 10 years that have gone to other leagues for their dream jobs. NBA, NFL, NHL, SPHL, AHL. I mean, it's not even hockey, it's baseball, it's football, it's soccer, MLS, things like that. And that's what I want for them. I want my staff to reach their dream job. And some of them stay with me in Kalamazoo because they love our community, but some, they are all over the country. And so when I head out to Seattle this fall, I'm going to go see some of my friends at the Mariners and at the McCracken, or the Kraken, in hockey and baseball.
Wow. That must be rewarding.
Very. I love it. I love sports leadership. And I fell into this career completely on accident. And so you and I talked off air a little bit, but my career actually started in banking. And I went to Western Michigan University here in Kalamazoo and graduated with my degree in business management. They didn't have a sports management degree back when I graduated 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. Not that I would have even gotten it, by the way, because I didn't want to be in sports. And I worked in banking for 13 years. I was in leadership. I worked my way up into a regional manager type role over the 13 years. And then I had this opportunity to work at a local level with the Chamber of Commerce here in Kalamazoo. Mm-hmm. And I'm born and raised here, and I love our community. So I thought, you know what? I've been in the same career path for 13 years. Let me try something different. Mm-hmm. And one of my personality, I'm definitely a rebel. And I get antsy because I am an achiever. And so I'm like, I'd love to try something new. I was in my mid-30s. And so I went to the Chamber of Commerce, which is housed inside of our economic development agency. Mm-hmm. And I learned a really, really valuable life lesson at that time. The CEO at the time, he's no longer there. He was a gentleman that would speak publicly about the type of culture that is what everyone would dream of. right? They'd want to go work for. The reality was that inside the organization, it was not that.
Wow.
And so how do you navigate that in, young-ish in your career? And so I committed to myself that I was going to make a 2-year commitment because I loved what I did at the Chamber of Commerce for the businesses, the small businesses in our community. I loved it. I loved ribbon cuttings and networking events and public policy conversations. I did not like the culture internally. And so I almost made it 2 years, Steve, almost, but I couldn't do it. I let up and I decided I was leaving with nothing. I said, I had a mortgage, I had 3 kids, I had a husband, and I said, I can't do this anymore. And I chose to walk away.
Wow.
Very scary decision.
Yeah.
But I applied for a different job within Kalamazoo, within Greenleaf Hospitality Group, to run a clothing boutique because I wanted less responsibility. And it was inside the Radisson Hotel downtown Kalamazoo. Well, it's privately owned, but they own hotels, restaurants, retail, and a pro hockey team.
Oh.
And they said, Toni, you're going to be bored at this store, this retail store. I said, I know, I want to be bored. I don't want responsibility. I've done this for 13 years. I just want to chill. They're like, no, we've got something else for you. I said, what? They said the Kalamazoo Wings.
Wow.
I said, the hockey team? Because I grew up here. Wow. They're like, yeah. They're like, it needs some help. And I said, I don't know anything about hockey. I said a swear word, but I'm going to keep it clean for you. I said a swear word. And I was like, I don't know anything about hockey. And they said, that's okay. We don't want someone that knows about hockey. We want someone that knows how to build a culture, knows how to sell, and loves Kalamazoo.
Wow.
And I said, okay, now so I said yes to the best job I never knew I wanted, and I took a 35% pay cut. And this is another big life lesson. I teach my kids this. I have 3 kids. 2 are in college. One's going to be a senior in high school. That if you're passionate about something, the money will follow. Yeah. I am mission over money all day long. Yeah. And it's been very true in my entire career. I absolutely love what I do for a living. And I would have never, ever considered it when I was in college or in my 20s or even halfway through my 30s. And here I am 10 years later making a difference for women in sports, and then diversity, equity, inclusion as a whole, because we do different game themes, because we have such a large spotlight. So we'll do deaf awareness games, we'll do a Black excellence game, hockey for her game, Alzheimer's awareness, breast cancer awareness. So we do a lot of different things to bring awareness around different types of diversity, equity, inclusion initiatives.
So all those initiatives that you see sports teams run come from the business office.
They do.
Interesting.
They all come from right up here on the creative team.
And I want to go back to something you said about taking a 35% pay cut. John Maxwell is I'm certified for his coaching, but I just love his philosophy. I use it more than for my own learning than I do some of the presentations I do. And he said something that was, it moved me a number of years ago. He said that he never looked at a job for what it paid him because he got offers all along the way as he started to grow to preach in these big churches. And a lot of people would talk to him about, well, you're going to be the center, you're going to be the spotlight in this big church. And what he looked at was, how would he grow? How would the position challenge him? And he often took pay cuts and going to churches where people said to him, why did you take that church? Because he saw from the people around him that they would help him grow, that they were had remarkable attitudes and modeling amazing behaviors, and he knew he'd learn something from them. So it's fascinating, right? You take, I would say, you wouldn't call it a 90-degree turn from what you were doing. It was like 180 or maybe even 360. It's like you got spun around and there was a new door. So obviously it all worked out, but what are some of the things that, you found so fascinating about it, and how can you relate it? I mean, you're a woman in a field that's mostly male. So how can you relate some of what you learned to the women you're going to be that are going to be on your podcast, and of course the men too, right? We all need to have a lesson. what reaches us was never meant to miss us, right? So this is fascinating.
Yeah. So one thing about personality type plays a huge role. And when I'm coaching my clients, I talk about that. We're not all the same person, right? So no one's going to go at it necessarily the way that I did. But my personality type is one where if there's a bottom of the mountain, there's a mountain I'm looking at the top. I'm like, I can't wait to get up there and I'm going to figure out how. Some people are like, I'm not going to be able to do that. And that's okay. And then as a coach, I help people, get to their summit, right?
Yeah.
But for me, I'm like, I can't wait to figure it out. And I know I'm going to fail a couple times, and that's okay too, because I'm going to learn. And so to your point, I'm willing to go backwards further to go forward faster. So I'm like a slingshot. Pull me back. I'll take a 35% pay cut. Let that bad boy go, and I'm flying.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of an analogy to describe my personality.
Yeah.
But how I tackled this was, and I got asked this, I don't know, 2 or 3 years into the job, they're like, Toni, how did you turn it around? I'm like, I don't know. I just did it. So I sat down and I went inside, because this was an inside job. And I said, how did you do this? And really reflected. And I came up with my 6 leadership pillars. And I'll walk you through them real quick here.
Yeah.
And I have applied these pillars. It started with the hockey team, but I have applied them to other things in my life, such as quitting drinking, completing an Ironman or 2. I've done 2 Ironmans at triathlon. Or I've been divorced and remarried. So just different areas of my life where I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do. What do I do? So let me figure it out. So leadership pillar number 1 is go to the experts.
Go to the experts.
So I didn't know how to run a hockey team.
You don't mind, do you?
No, God, please write them down. And it's on my website too. I'm sure at the end you'll ask me, but ToniWillCoaching.com. If people want to get a PDF, they can go there and download it for free.
Toni Will's Coaching. It's a good time to kind of segue that in, and we'll do it again at the end. Toni Will's Coaching.
Yeah, no S at the end of Will, just WIL.
Yeah, that's right. ToniWillCoaching.com.
Yep.
.com. Thank you.
So go to the experts. I wasn't an expert at running a hockey team. I didn't really know how to quit drinking. I didn't know what to do when I was going through my divorce. Like anything. I'm buying a house. Who do I go to? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. We all run into these things in our lives. So find an expert in that space. And that's what I did with the hockey team. I went to the other teams. I started with our division. And I said, okay, I'm going to go visit the GMs of these teams and figure out how they do it. Because each city or each franchise does it different. I can take pieces and parts and move to leadership number 2, which is innovate. I can make it fit for Kalamazoo. Or I don't know how I want to navigate my relationship with alcohol, or navigate my relationship with caffeine, or with I stopped eating meat. Like, there's just certain things in my lifestyle. So I'm like, there's not just one way to do this. So I'm going to find experts in other methodologies. And so I would seek those out. And then I would innovate it and make it fit for my life. So that's leadership pillar number 2.
Yeah.
Leadership pillar number 3, I've alluded to this earlier, when I'm coming up and down my Mount Everest, is to make mistakes. I love making mistakes. And I love it when my staff makes mistakes, because what do we learn from more? Our successes or our mistakes?
Mistakes, right?
Hands down, because we beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
So I like making mistakes because it teaches us something, and it proves that we're not perfect. And in a world where how we look or present ourselves on social media is so important, it's part of our brand, but it makes you authentic human being to have more compassion for others too.
Yeah.
So that's number 3. And I made plenty of mistakes running this hockey team because I didn't know what I was doing. And a lot of it's on the business side. Like one time I had my marketing person order 8,000 brochures to sell corporate sponsorships. Well, how many businesses are in Kalamazoo? Maybe I should have started there, because there's not 8,000. And Steve, they were dated for a certain hockey season.
Oh my.
Terrible. I laugh at that one to this day, because it's like, what are you doing, Toni? Setting money on fire?
Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time.
But I never forgot it.
Yeah.
So that's number 3.
Yeah,
Number
4.
4.
Yeah.
So number 4 is very personality driven, and that's why I talk about my personality a little bit. I'm high courage. I'm a rebellion or rebel. I have a lot of rebellion in me, but I ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
Yeah.
And so there are certain things in the business world where I want to run a special ticket package, and it's a loss leader. Like, we're losing money by putting this package on sale for X number of dollars, but we're getting someone in the door to experience our product with the idea that we'll earn their business back because they had such an amazing time. And that's where we'll generate revenue, right? Or from food and beverage or parking. And so I would just put these ideas on sale, even though they were losing money. And so I had to, I knew what I was doing. I was doing it on purpose to prove a point. And luckily I worked for an organization that was like, go for it, Toni. We trust you, we think. So a lot of times I ask for forgiveness rather than permission.
I agree with that.
Number 5.
Especially when one hits the age of 70, ask for forgiveness rather than permission. But you can start, to your point, you can start anytime, right? That's a good one for leaders.
Anytime. You do not need to start any of this stuff in your 20s. You don't have to wait till you're middle-aged or in the back half of your career. No, you could start anytime. Number 5 is really culture-driven. Because I've worked in toxic cultures. I macromanage. And by that, I mean nobody likes to be micromanaged. And I have been in my career. So I hire and have employees that work under my tutelage that I hold loosely. I trust. I give them a lot of autonomy until maybe I'm proven otherwise. And I have been proven otherwise at times. This career doesn't, it's not all unicorns and rainbows all the time. And so I've had to have very tough conversations. I've had to let people go before. But that's a small percentage. I've had more wins than losses. And so I really encourage leaders to hold things loosely. While I've created a lot of great things at the Kalamazoo Wings, it's not mine, right? It's my team. It's the franchise. It's the community. It's not Toni's. And so how can I not hold things with such a death grip? And that idea of macro manage allows me to hold things.
I love that one. Macro manage. Yeah.
And then last but not least, this is the best one. Have fun.
Yeah.
We take ourselves so seriously sometimes. Even when I talk about and share that I no longer drink alcohol, I have so much more fun not drinking. Like, a lot of people hold this belief that in order to have fun, I have to have an alcoholic beverage. That is so not true.
No, it's not true.
And
my wife and I watch TV shows, and every time there's someone that, they have a bad night, and it's funny how many TV shows send people to the bar. Or they take out a bottle of scotch or something. You want a drink? And then when something devastating happens, then they go to the whole bottle. And they're doing this on TV quite often. I'm not sure if producers are aware of it. It's not a cure. It's not a cure. Because when you come back from all of that escape, the problem still faces.
100%. And now you come back to it, and now you're kind of hungover, and the problem's still there.
Yeah. And maybe they even get worse sometimes, right, by escaping. Yeah. We have a lot of escapes in this country, and it's something I talk about in the small-minded thinking idea. And so when you talk to encourage women in leadership, and you also enroll men to help, right, because listen, we need each other, right?
Yep.
That makes for a better world. The societies that cut out half the population by saying women can't go to school and can't work in jobs, and there's still some of those societies that exist, which to me is so small-minded, what I call the acorn brain. This has a lot of potential, but it's not going to grow into an oak tree without going through many seasons of challenge. And small-minded thinking versus limitless thinking. And what you just said about macro managing, that's infinite thinking, limitless thinking, as opposed to small-minded thinking. So not just your experience, but also the people you speak to, what would you say is your feeling about that small-minded thinking I'm sure you've run into, right?
Oh, yes.
Especially being one woman in a very male-dominated organization. I'm sure there's more women in the business office today than there were when you got there.
Mm-hmm.
So talk a little bit about that, because I think we really need this today.
Yeah, so I love this question. I love the acorn. I love this is where I spend my time, right? Is number one, the actual brain. So I've done a lot of studying because when one of the questions I ask my podcast guests is, what have you changed your mind about lately? Because I want to know, like, I changed my mind about the role alcohol played in my life. Now, that wasn't a light switch decision. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to stop drinking. Because there were some roots in there. There were some deep rooted beliefs. And how was I going to change those beliefs? Well, good news, our brain is plastic. I read this book called The Power of Neuroplasticity by Shad Helmstetter.
Mm-hmm.
It's fabulous because it's talking about what you're sharing with the acorn. Our brain can be rewired.
Yeah.
It's all about what we put into it and what our beliefs are around a said topic. So if I believe that alcohol is fun and that's the role I've given it, well, it's going to be really hard for me to go to certain social situations and think I'm still going to have fun with that alcohol. I really have to explore my thoughts around that and have a growth mindset.
That's true.
Because that's what you're talking about. It's a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset.
Yeah.
And that's why I ask people what they're changing their minds about, because guess what? And you know this, Steve, we're allowed to change our minds.
But who's going to question our answers if we don't question our answers? Each of us individually, right?
Right. Exactly. So it's just a power to know. And research only came that far in the 80s. Like in the 80s, because we used to be taught that once your brain's hardwired this way, whatever this way meant, and you couldn't change. Well, that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love that. And it's like, what else can I question in my life? And so my women's in sports leadership and saying, wait a minute, I bring a lot of value to this boardroom and to this league because I look at things differently than the men around the table.
Mm-hmm.
Research shows that women are better leaders because many of us are mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a capacity, I have higher level of empathy and compassion, and I have this ability to handle multiple tasks at once.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be decisive and authoritative and loving all at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what great leadership entails, some of the qualities. And so it's a long answer to your short question, but it's all connected.
Yeah. Well, you're right. The neuro researchers have found that when they do fMRIs, that negative experiences are stored in one part of the neocortex. And then as they work with negative people and teach them and coach them on ways to think more positively and follow up with fMRIs, they've discovered on the opposite side, new neural pathways are created by the brain, which default more often to the positive. So it's very much like stroke victims. We have to, Joe Dispenza calls it reminding ourselves. Mm-hmm. We have to remind ourselves. And it's fascinating that you encouraging people to think differently, starting with yourself, because you're modeling it. You're creating new neural pathways by challenging your own answers. And then you're encouraging people to do that with the work you're doing, which is, I think it's important for society because we have such small-minded thinking. Even our leadership is spending time doing this. They just blame each other for stuff. And it gets so nasty that the truth is lost somewhere in the middle. None of them are true. None of it is true.
Well, and that's
we have to just be willing to have a dialogue.
It is. It's all about communication.
Yeah.
And bridging that gap. Now, like our leadership in this country, and we're coming into an election year without getting too political, but they're two opposing sides. And there is a gap there, obviously. But how do we bridge that gap? And we can do that if we have a willingness. And that's where all this starts, a willingness. And people that listen to your podcast, they are growth-minded individuals, right? They want to hear what you're sharing because they have a willingness to grow and learn and maybe change their mind about something or read something new or listen to something new. And that is a beautiful thing. Again, that can be done at any stage of life.
Yeah. Yeah. The subconscious stores things, and it's fascinating that the mind remembers everything, every emotional experience we've had up until the age of 35. This is neuro research, not my own. And then what happens is it's very much like driving. So after 35, when you learned how to drive, you were nervous. Of course, you weren't 35, but so being younger, you were nervous about all the things you had to learn. Eventually, and I don't know if this happens for you, but I go down the highway and every once in a while my brain says, who just drove?
Oh. Oh, yeah.
And it was me, right? I'm the one that just drove. So it's the same with all our emotional experiences. Our brain remembers how we've reacted over time. And it says, oh, when you see someone like Joe, we know what you do. You give them a piece of your mind. Or when you're in a certain situation, like maybe it's in traffic, you give them the number 1 sign. And we can overcome that small-minded thinking. And I think your leadership, for example, with your management skills and the way you approach the people who work with you, and your podcast, right? You're living it. You're encouraging people to think differently, look at things differently. And you just said something about, there's 2 sides. And the question is, do we want to have a bay or a bridge? William Ury asks that in his negotiation books, The Power of a Positive No and Getting the Yes. And he's got a new one that I'm listening to. And he talks about going up to the balcony. A good idea is always go up above the situation and then ask the question, do you want to see a bay or a bridge with whatever you're working towards? And a bridge is a much better idea because people can start on either side and gradually make progress.
Absolutely.
With the dialogue.
Well, and I love talking about the subconscious because our subconscious at times is battling our conscious mind. And what that's called is cognitive dissonance. So if you're doing something in your life where you're like, I don't like how this feels, why am I still doing it? Right? Like, why am I picking up my phone and scrolling through, doom scrolling at night before bed? We've all been in that. Like, I don't want to do that. Why am I doing it?
Yeah, right.
And that's called cognitive dissonance. And so in order to change that behavior, we have to have a willingness. Do we want the gap or a bridge, or a bay or a bridge?
Yeah.
And if we want a bridge, okay, what new habits are we going to instill to help us start to build that bridge?
Yeah.
And so that's
we have to reprogram the mind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We default into it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about subconscious things, right? The confirmation bias is what gets in my way, maybe others, but I have a voice in my head that says, it's time to tell me a story about something or someone. And then I can catch myself gathering evidence to prove it's true so I can be right. And what we forget about being right is that we're making others wrong. How about, how'd you come to that? I'd love to hear how you came to that position. And are you open to a dialogue about it? Are you open to maybe even considering other viewpoints? But I'm considering yours. It's fascinating. And I respect your viewpoint. And I'm going to consider other ways to change my own viewpoints. We get so stuck. And then we gather evidence to prove it's true and then forget about it. We're actually now in quick, dry cement. Yes. And we're not moving.
Yep. Sorry, my dog's barking. Hopefully you didn't hear that.
It's okay because what I'm glad about is my dogs didn't hear it because then we would have had a dog love fest.
Yeah, I just love this conversation because I don't know that enough people are having it. And it's really a lot of the work I've been doing the last 4 years. And I set different goals for myself so I can lean into curiosity and learn new things. So I read my age every year. So this year I turned 46. I'm reading 46 books. I also listen to 46 podcast episodes, not different, but I listen to, and I keep a log of them, and then I put it out in my newsletter out to those individuals who subscribe to it. And those are just a couple of ways I grow each year and learn new things so I can change my mind about other things and be challenged, because that confirmation bias is real.
It is real. It is real. All right. So a couple things. One is, how do people get to your podcast? How do people get your blog? And how do people find you for coaching? and etc. Give us all your contact information.
Yes. So, okay, the one catch-all to find me, I'm on LinkedIn as Steve. Steve and I connected there. That's how we met. So it's Toni Lentini Will, Will. So you can find me on LinkedIn and just drop me a message that you are connecting with me because you heard me on Steve's podcast. That way I don't say no. And then, or you can go, there's other places you can find me, ToniWillCoaching.com, TONI. WILL coaching.com. That's my professional development coaching business. But then my lifestyle coaching business around alcohol, fitness, nutrition is called Mindfulness Elevated.
Oh.
And that's mindfulnesselevated.com. And I've had that business for 3 years now, and it's been very successful. I've helped a lot of people change their relationship with fitness, nutrition, alcohol, caffeine.
Remind me to introduce you to Kimberly Quinn, who's a professor at the University of Vermont. I'll connect you because she has a podcast, and I think it would be good for both of you to kind of be guests for each other. And she talks about mindfulness, and I'll get you her website.
Wonderful.
She'll shoot me when she sees me the next time because I forgot the website. But she and I she's also a guest on one of my previous podcasts. So fascinating guest, and it's all about the mind, programming the mind, and about abundance and prosperity. But it isn't just about money; that it's about having an abundant and compassionate and grateful heart, right? Because that's what attracts amazing things.
100%.
Amazing things.
Well, and that's what Mindfulness Elevated is about. It's about abundance versus not scarcity mindset, right?
Yeah. We have a lot in common because I've talked about that, right? I started out as the Prosperity Institute.
Yes. Prosperity. Well, and that's the thing. Like, I hold my coaching businesses loosely. And that's why they've been successful, because I'm able to do that while I run a pro hockey team.
Yeah.
And it makes a big difference. And the K-Wings, kwings.com is where you can find anything Kalamazoo Wings, or our social media. We're on all social media platforms under Kalamazoo Wings.
Kalamazoo Wings.
And
I'm writing it down so I can follow up. Yeah, that's great. And what are some last thoughts you want to leave women with and the general audience? Because men are listening too.
Yeah. Well, I always like to say this. I love men too, and I want them to know that. One of my biggest mentors and supporters in my life is my dad and my husband, and I have a son. And there's just so many important men that have been in my life. And I think it's all about collaboration, similar mindsets, and lifting one another up, which is why I have men on my podcast too. I'd love for you to be on, Steve. I'm going to send you information to be on Women In, because you're lifting me up right now, right? Sure. And so that's what this is about.
I'd love to, sure.
And so what I would love to see from women, and what I'm encouraging, is to lean into that curiosity and courageousness, and you are everything that you imagine you can be, you can be. And I just see a lot of women make themselves small. And my goal is to help them see that they're amazing women no matter what they do in life, and to play big.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, I meet men who do that play small and make themselves small. And I think the big message too that you've mentioned is that we need each other, right? That you have to be able to ask for help from others. And that to exclude one or the other, right? If men want to walk around excluding women, that's not healthy. And women want to walk around excluding men, they're locking out 50% of their own makeup, because we both have male and female within us, that's always fascinating to me.
100%. Yep, absolutely. So this has just been such an honor. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And again, I want to encourage everybody to get to ToniWillCoaching.com. Check out the K-Wings, get to a game, buy a season ticket, buy a box, whatever you can do to support the K-Wings if you live in that area. And Mindfulness Elevated, right? If you want to question your own thinking and get to a next level in your life, I think Toni could help you.
Thank you.
It's just a thought that I'm having, right? And it's not a small-minded thought. It's an expansive thought. And then I'll leave everyone with this thought, right? If you have any small-minded thinking, you're not mirroring what created an infinite universe that we live in. Just think about it. We're a speck. Here, I have a globe next to me always. I have an acorn and a globe. So I have a globe that reminds me just how small we are. And by the way, physicists that I know have said to me, Steve, you know your representation with this tiny marble is larger than we actually are in the universe? I said, well, I can't put a grain of sand on a stand and then understand what it means to me, so I use a marble. And then when my ego gets activated, I use a bigger marble, right? Because I say, well, come on, we're a little bigger, Steve. It's not true, right? When my little acorn brain takes over, I have a voice that runs me, and I can tell you that that's not the voice that needs to run me. I have to learn to be more responsive, understanding, compassionate, embrace all the life forms that the Creator gave us. Whatever life force created a universe, right? You can have a religion and call it a God. That's what I do. I call it a God. But it could be the quantum field, as Joe Dispenza says. Just remember to challenge yourself and expand beyond small-minded thinking and include the women in your life. Bring them up. Help people win in general. And that's limitless thinking. All right, with that, Toni Wills, thank you so much. I will say Toni Lentini Wills because somewhere along the line, who knows, right? Maybe we're distant cousins.
Who knows? We'll figure it out. 23andMe will tell us.
That's right.
Thanks, Steve.
All right. You're welcome, Toni. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.